Hi everyone. Today we are going to discuss grammar topic. Before going to announce the topic, let's look at the image here, the picture here. So we know these two characters and very famous. One is Thor, superhero. Another one is Thanos, supervillain. And when you look at the picture, we know some action is going on here. So what is the action is going on here? Those who watched movie, they can easily grasp what action is going on. What's a very important action that too? What is it? That Thor is killing Thanos. Thor is killing Thanos. So the action here is killing. In order to express the action to someone, you have two possible ways to express. This action can be expressed two possible ways. So what is it? Thor is killing Thanos is one of the possible ways. Thanos is being killed by Thor is the other possibility. Thor is killing Thanos. Thanos is being killed by Thor. Let us look at the first one. Is killing. The form of the verb here, is killing, tells us the subject is the doer. The subject is the doer. See, Thor is killing. So the form of the verb tells us that the subject is the doer. Look at the second one. Thanos is being killed by Thor. Here, is being killed. Is being killed. The form of the verb tells the subject is a receiver. Subject is a receiver. Here the doer is the subject. Here the receiver is the subject. So you have two possible ways to express an action. Suppose if you the doer is the subject. The doer is the subject. Then we call active voice. Then we call active voice. When the receiver is the subject, we call passive voice. We call passive voice. So there are two ways the action can be expressed. Look at the other example. And these two are also very famous and famous cartoon. Doraemon. And those who watch these episodes can easily understand Nobita always comes with a problem and then Doraemon always helps Nobita. So almost all the episodes we find the same. Now look at the example here. Doraemon always helps Nobita. This action helps. So this action can be expressed in two possible ways. What are the two possible ways? Doraemon always helps Nobita is one possible way. Nobita is always helped by Doraemon is another possible way. Now when you look at the verb here, well helps, the form of the verb tells us the subject is the doer. Subject is the doer. Whereas in the second, is helped, the form of the verb is helped, tells us the subject is the receiver. Is a receiver. So Doraemon is the doer and Nobita is a receiver. So when the subject is a doer, then we call active voice. When the receiver is the subject, then we call passive voice. So today's topic what we are going to discuss is active and passive voice from basic to advanced. So before knowing what is active and passive voice, let us see what is voice. Voice definition. Voice is the form of the verb that is used to show whether the subject is the doer or the performer or the subject is the receiver. So voice is what? Form of the verb. See what is the form here? Is killing. Other form is being killed. These forms tell us. So the form of the verb the form of the verb that is used to show whether the subject is the doer. Subject is the doer or subject is the receiver. Subject is the receiver. So that is called a voice. So voice is the form of the verb. So remember, what is a voice? Voice is the form of the verb. Earlier I told active voice and a passive voice. What is active voice? What is a passive voice? The definitions we see now. When the form of the verb shows whether the subject is the doer or performs the action, it is called active voice. Thor is killing Thanos. The subject is the doer. Doraemon always helps Nobita. Doraemon, the subject is the doer. So when the subject is a doer, it is called a active voice. Why do we call it active voice? Because the doer is active. What is the passive voice definition? When the form of the verb shows whether the subject is the receiver, Thanos is the receiver. Now subject is Thanos. So what is the subject? See, subject is nothing but that comes before the verb. That comes before the verb is called subject. Thanos, Nobita. Here, Thanos is the receiver. Now subject is receiver. Nobita is receiver. Subject is receiver. So when the form of the verb shows whether the subject is the receiver, it is called a passive voice. Why do we call it a passive voice? The reason is the doer is here the Thor, Doraemon. These two are inactive. They are passive. So that's the reason we call passive voice. Here the doer is active. He is in the subject position. Whereas here receiver is in the subject position, is inactive. So we call it a passive voice. Now, voice is a form of the verb. So verbs, two types. Transitive, intransitive. What is a transitive verb? If there is an object, it is a transitive verb. If there is no object, it is intransitive verb. Earlier I told an action can be expressed in two possible ways. But remember, that must be a transitive verb. The action must be transitive. So what is a transitive? There must be an object. So transitive verbs only transitive verbs have a passive voice because they have object. There are two types of objects we have. One is a direct object, another one is an indirect object. What is a direct object? What plus subject plus verb. If you question, then the answer is a direct verb. When we question to whom plus subject plus verb, then we get an indirect object. To change active to passive, in order to express an action in two possible ways, there must be an object. Without an object, passive form is not possible. So the verb must be transitive. Only transitive verbs have passive forms because they have object. Look at the example here. They are painting the picture. Now let us see what object is here. They are painting the picture. First let us see whether there is a direct object or not. What? Subject, verb. What? They are painting. What? They are painting. The picture. The answer is the picture. So there is a direct object. Let us see whether there is indirect object. To whom they are painting. Indirect object to whom? No? To whom, subject they are painting. To whom they are painting. There is no answer, which means there is no indirect object. No indirect object in the first sentence. Let's look at the second one. She gives me an ice cream. Let us look at the first one. Let's go for direct object. What? Subject, verb. What? She gives. What she gives? An ice cream. So an ice cream is direct. object. Next, to whom she gives. To whom she gives. Me. So me is an indirect object. So there is a direct object. So there is a possibility of two. There we can express two possible ways. Here are a direct object and indirect object. So here is also possible. Let's look at the third one. Joe suddenly appeared in the doorway. Let us look. Verb is door. Appeared. What? Joe appeared. There is no answer to that. Then there is no object here. Direct object. No direct object. Next, let us see whether there is indirect object. To whom Joe appeared. To whom Joe appeared. Again, no answer, which means no object. Neither direct object nor indirect object. Then the third sentence, appeared is intransitive verb, as there is no object, then we can't express in passive voice. There is only one way of expression, that is active voice. So passive voice is not possible for the third sentence. The reason is there is neither direct object nor indirect object. There must be at least one object to change into passive voice. Now, earlier I told you, an action can be expressed two possible ways. Both sentences convey the same meaning. Active voice, Thor is killing Thanos. Thanos is being killed by Thor. Both sentences convey the same meaning. Then we should get a doubt. Then why should we learn passive voice? So there is an active voice. Always I use only active voice. Thor is killing Thanos. Why should I use Thanos is being killed? Doraemon always helps Nobita. I use only active voice. Why should I learn passive voice? Nobita is always helped by Doraemon. What necessity there? Let us see the necessity of learning passive voice. Both sentences convey the same meaning. Now, why should we learn passive voice? Let us see now. When the receiver is more important than the doer. Thor is killing Thanos. Suppose you want to tell everyone that you give more importance to Thanos being a supervillain. He is being killed by Thor. So you want to highlight Thanos. Then we supposed to use a passive voice. For you, Thor is not to be considered. Thanos is supposed to be considered. I'll give you best example. Gandhi was assassinated. Now here, Gandhi is the receiver. What is the active form of Gandhi was assassinated? Passive form is Radhuram Godse assassinated Gandhiji. Radhuram Godse assassinated Gandhiji. But here, the importance we give to Gandhi, not Godse. So, when you want to give more importance to the receiver, then we use passive voice. Suppose you want to consider Thor is important. Okay, go with the active voice. But if you want to give more importance to Thanos, then choose passive voice. So that's it. So when you want to give more importance to the receiver, then we use passive voice. And especially where we find these kind of sentences in the processes, instructions, events, reports, headlines, news items, advertisements. Look here, example. 60 people were killed in shooting across Chicago between Friday and Monday morning. were killed. This were killed tells us 60 people are the receivers. Receivers. Here, 60 people are very important because the receiver is very important rather than the doer. The doer is not important. Receiver is important. 60 people were killed. So then we use passive voice. Second, when doer, the person who does the action, is unknown or wanted to be unknown. Suppose you don't know who is the doer, first thing, or you don't want to tell who is the doer. You don't know the doer, and second thing, you don't want to tell the doer. You don't want to tell about the doer. Then we need only passive voice. Look at an example. Jane was shot. Jane was shot. By whom? Don't know. So when you entered the room, you saw Jane. He was shot dead. So Jane was shot dead, of course. And here, as we don't know the shooter and we don't know who shot Jane, we need to express in passive voice. Look at the other one. This house was built in 1815. 1815. And it is not important. The doer is not important. Because the important thing here is house. So who built the house is not important. So we are talking about house. And you don't want to mention it. And you consider it is not important. Then we are supposed to use a passive voice. This house was built in 1815. Next, to make more polite or formal statements. The trees haven't been watered. The trees is the receiver here. Haven't been watered. This form tells haven't been watered is a passive form. This tells that the trees are the receivers. And this is more polite rather than say, you haven't watered the trees. This is active voice. It's less polite. So in order to make more polite and formal statements, we use a passive voice. So passive voice, 3 reasons. First, you want to give more importance to the receiver. Receiver is important to you. Second, you don't want to mention or you don't know the doer. If you don't want to mention or if you don't know the doer, we need a passive voice. Third, in order to make more polite and formal statements, we use a passive voice. So there's terms supposed to be known. What are the terms supposed to be known? In active voice, the doer is the subject. I have been telling the same. And then the receiver is the object. In active voice, the doer is the subject. The receiver is object. When it comes to passive voice, the receiver is the subject. The receiver is the subject. And the doer is called agent. Doer is called agent. In passive voice, the doer is called agent. And receiver is called subject. The action can be expressed 2 possible ways. That based on the form of the verb. Form of the verb. So we need to learn active form, passive form. So let us see. Change the form of the verb. Simple present tense. What is the active form? V1 or V1 plus SRES, which means we can say play or plays. Play or plays. I am taking example of play, verb play. So in passive voice, in active voice, the verb will be play or plays. V1 or V1 plus SRES. Based on the subject, if the subject is third person singular, we are supposed to use plays. In passive voice, this same form Am is are plus V3, which means is played. Is played. Or am played. Or are played. Active form, passive form in simple present. Next, present continuous or progress tense. Active form is am, is, are plus base form plus ing form. Base form plus ing form means base form of play is play, ing playing, which means am playing, is playing, are playing. If you find that form, that is continuous active form. So what is the passive form for that? Am, is, are plus being plus V3, which means am being played, is being played, or being played. If you find this form, then it is supposed to be in passive form. Next, present perfect. What is the form of present perfect? Active form, have, has plus V3. Have played, has played. Passive form, have, has plus been plus V3. Have been played, has been played. The present perfect continuous tense. Active form. And most of the books are, maybe your teachers might have told you there is no possibility of writing passive form for present perfect continuous. No, there is a possibility. And there is even sometimes we need to use present perfect continuous tense in passive voice. But very rare we use that. So don't think that there is no passive form for present perfect continuous. There is a passive form, but we use very rare. It doesn't mean that there is no passive form. So we have a passive form. Have, has plus been plus base form of ing. Base form of ing means playing. Have been playing, has been playing. Passive form. Have been being played, has been being played. These are present. Let's move to the past now. Simple past tense. Verb V2 or did plus base form. Did plus base form. So not did plus V1 form. After did we write base form, not V1 form. So V2 or did plus base form. What is that? Played. Played or did subject play. This form is used in negative sentences and questions. Did plus base form is used in negative and questions of a past tense. Next, passive voice. Was verb plus V3. Was played, were played. Next, past continuous progress tense. Active form. Was verb plus base form plus ing. Base form means playing. Was playing, were playing. Passive voice. Was being played, were being played. Perfect. Past perfect. Had plus V3. Had played. Passive form. Had been plus V3. Had been played. Past perfect continuous tense. Even this you come across, there is no passive form for it. But still there is a passive form. You need to know that. Active voice. Had plus been plus base form plus ing. Passive voice. Had plus been plus being plus V3. Let's move to the modals. Modals plus simple. Active voice. Modal plus base form. Modal plus base form means, for example, take modal will. So later we discuss what are the modals. Let's take for example will. Will plus base form, play, will play. Passive form, will be played. I'm taking one example, will. And they're taking one of the modals, will. There are many models. Later we discuss what are the models. Will. Next, modal plus continuous or progressive. And this even teachers might have told there is no passive voice, or maybe you come across some books there is no passive voice. No, there is a passive voice even for modal continuous progressive, which means future continuous or future progressive. Modal plus B plus base form plus ing form. So again we take the same model, will be played. Passive voice, will be being played. Will be being played. Modal plus perfect. Modal will. Will have played. Will have been played. Will have played. Will have been played. Passive form. Modal perfect continuous. So even this you come across no passive voice. But still there is a passive voice. Modal plus perfect continuous. Modal plus have plus been plus base form plus ing. Will have been playing. Will have been playing is active form. Will have been being played is a passive form. Next, semi-auxiliaries. Semi-auxiliary plus 2 plus base form. What are the semi-auxiliary? Will come to know later. Next, semi-auxiliary plus 2 plus B plus V3. So all these forms, total 13 forms, active forms and passive forms, you have to learn. So when you know these forms, then we can say whether the sentence is an active, whether the sentence is in passive. In order to make receiver highlight, we are supposed to use only passive form, which means you are supposed to know the passive form of that active form. So we have to learn all these 13, and better after learning, write down without seeing. Now list of modals and semi-auxiliaries. There are 3 types of modals. Central modals, marginal modals, modal idioms. Let us see central modals. Will, would, shall, should, can, could, may, might, must. These are central modals. Marginal modals. Dare, need, ought to, use it. Modal idioms. Had better, would rather, sooner. Semi-auxiliaries. Have to, about to, able to, bound to, going to. Obliged to, supposed to, willing to. These are called semi-auxiliaries. So list of modals and semi-auxiliaries. Right. The next video we discuss. Thank you.